Okay, so I wanted to go over a short example of assembly, just kind of show you the process of how we assemble the load vector for the structure from a couple of force vectors for the elements along with their lookup vectors. Okay, so over here we have P sub f, which is the structural load vector. It could be any vector really, but we're just assembling. Initially it's all zeros, all right, so there's 8 entries in this little example. They're all initialized to 0. And over here we have a force vector for an element, and then we have a lookup vector for that element. And then say we have another element. This is its force vector, and this is its lookup vector. Okay? So, just kind of the lookup process, or the assembly process, is we go through the lookup vectors for each element. And the lookup vector tells us the index in which we want to accumulate the entries in the structural load vector. Okay, so for instance, let's just start here. We'll look at lookup vector for the first element. The first index in this lookup vector, or first value in this lookup vector, is a 1. And then the corresponding value is a 5. Okay, so this says we need to look at the first entry of our load vector, P sub f, all right, and then add to its current value 5. Okay, so this 0 here, all right, we'll get PF1 equals 0 plus 5. All right, we take its current value of 0 and we get 5. So what's 0 plus 5? It's 5. All right, so this goes from 0 to 5. Okay. Sorry about that. And then we go down to the next entry in lookup vector. It's 2. All right, the corresponding value is 10. All right, so it says for entry 2 of the lookup vector, we're going to take its current value, which is 0, and then add to it 10. All right, so 0 plus 10 is 10. All right, so this goes from 0 to 10. All right, 3, lookup vector value of 3 tells us we go into the third entry. We add to it the corresponding value that's in the force vector. All right, so this goes from 0 to 5. Okay, 4 goes to 10, 5 goes to 5, negative 1. Let's just ignore it for P sub f. All right, but 4 and 5 we add in 10 and 5. All right, these are just kind of arbitrary values within the force vectors. All right, but the key is that we're mapping these 5s and 10s into the P sub f vector based on the values in the lookup vector. The values in the lookup vector tell us which row or which entry of P sub f we want to write into and accumulate. Okay, so let's say we went down to the next element, and it has lookup vector 1, 2, 3, negative 1, negative 1, 6. All right, and then the force vector has 6s and 12s just for kicks, right? But we start here. This is a lookup value of 1, entry of 6, so it says read the current value within the P sub f vector and then add to it 6. All right, so we'll have P sub f of 1 equals its current value, which is 5, plus 6. What's 5 plus 6? Well, it's 11. All right, so this goes from 5 to 11. Okay, second entry down here, 2, or lookup vector 2, and then we get a value of 12. All right, so we're going to add to the second entry of P sub f, which is right here. All right, we're going to add 12 to that entry. So it's going to go from 10 to 22. Okay, and then we're going to go down to the third entry of the lookup vector, which is a value of 3. So it says in the third entry of P sub f, add the corresponding value from the force vector. So we'll add 6 to this entry, and it'll become 11. All right. -1, just forget those. And then entry 6 in the lookup vector, we're going to add 12 to the current value. All right, so that's 12. Okay, so this 6th entry is going to go from 0 to 12. Okay, and then, there's going to be more elements. All right, we're just kind of looping through all the force vectors and then looking at the corresponding lookup vectors, and then just kind of doing these mappings based on the index in the lookup vector and then the value within the force vector. All right, but kind of the general expression is that P sub f of L sub I is equal to the current value P sub f at L sub I plus little p sub I. Okay, so these expressions with Python or MATLAB or any computer program, the right-hand side over here is what's evaluated first. All right, so we read the current value of P sub f at the L sub ith entry, okay, and then add to it the value from P sub little p sub I for the element, okay, and then what's on the left-hand side is where we write what's on the right-hand side. All right, so 5 plus 6 was 11, let's say, and then we write into the L sub ith entry of P sub f. So you see P sub f, L sub I on both sides of this equation, but the right-hand side's evaluated first, and we read out the current value. Initially it's 0, and then we just accumulate, or assemble the structural load vector from all the element contributions based on the lookup vector for that element. Okay, so I hope this helps, and let me know if you have any questions.